Snooky's brother.
Gauges. They are an integral part of JDM car culture. Of course, I want in on the game and bought myself this set of STRI gauges for oil temperature and boost pressure. In this video, I will take you through the steps needed to install them and show you the finished result. There are probably thousands of brands and choices for gauges out there. I chose these because they were recommended to me. Let's start with the boost gauge. This gauge comes in a set with the gauge, a mini wiring harness, the gauge harness, a signal wire, a reset switch, a boost pressure sensor, some boost hose with a T-piece, mounting hardware for the gauge, and of course a manual. We will also need some additional boost hose in order to make everything fit more neatly. And that's it. Let's start with the boost pressure sensor. It needs to be connected to a boost source here. The sensor then takes a boost reading and sends the result to the gauge via this signal wire. Our boost source will be taken from this tiny hose that connects to the fuel pressure regulator. This position is easy to reach and provides a reading of the manifold pressure. After removing the old hose, we can mock up a new hose and integrate the T-piece in order to give us a pressure hose that can be connected to the boost pressure sensor. Once that is installed, we can run our boost reading hose to the sensor. I chose to neatly tuck the hose under the intake manifold. After that hose is connected to the sensor, it is time to run the signal wire into the inside of the car. For this I am taking the same path as my subwoofer power cable. I am also running the cable through the same opening in the firewall into the driver's foot valve. Before we continue the installation on the inside of the car, let's first connect our hardware for the oil temperature gauge. This set also comes with a gauge, a wiring harness and signal wire, a reset button, a gauge harness and mounting hardware. We will not need the wiring harness, but we will need this, the oil temperature sensor. In order to install that sensor, I'm going to use this oil filter adapter plate, which gets sandwiched between the engine block and the oil filter. The sensor can be installed in one of multiple holes in the adapter. I'm installing it here in order to make sure it sits well in the oil flow of the oil filter. To make sure the adapter won't leak, I'm sealing all threads on the plate. And this is what it looks like ready to go in. Sadly, the correct nut for my oil filter thread won't fit into the adapter plate, which is why I had to make that fit first, but a bit of grinding later, we are ready to go. Now it's time to put the car on the lift and drain the engine oil. Of course, don't forget to let the oil pan plug fall into the oil bucket. Once the old oil is out, we can remove the oil filter. Now it's time to dive in there and install the adapter plate. It takes a bit of fiddling, but after a lot of shouting, everything sits in place. Finally, it's time to wire the sensor. With all the cables now in the cabin, it's time for a bit of cable management in the engine bay. And of course, not to forget new engine oil. After that, we can continue with the cabin part of the installation, where once again we need to take the center console apart. Once that's done, we can move on to wiring the mini wiring harness for our gauges. There are 4 wires. There's a constant power to feed the gauges, a switched power to tell the gauges when to switch on and off, a ground wire, and another switched power to control the lights of the gauges. This one is optional and I chose not to integrate them for now because I find the lights on the gauges too bright. This is the mini wiring harness we made these connections to. One harness can be used for multiple gauges, which is a neat feature with these. Now we can plug in the first gauge and see if it works. Looks great! Next, we can plug in the sensor wire, then repeat everything for the second gauge. For mounting the gauges, I found this Nissan S14 specific 3D printed gauge holder online. I think it looks elegant and integrates quite neatly into the cabin. And there you go, the gauges are installed. All that's left to do now is to do the peel and take the car on a test run. Thank you for watching and have a great day.
Yeah. Please tell me that I can't, that I won't, that I fail, that I'll never make it out, yeah. Please tell me all the bad, never good, fill my head full of every single doubt, yeah. Please say any negative thoughts, I pop off when I hear people say I cannot. I get off to the thought of proving everyone wrong. I won't stop.